Good afternoon. Welcome to Trail Talk. I'm so glad you guys could join us today. I'm Edie right here at the Chisholm Trail Heritage Center in Duncan, Oklahoma, and I have a very special guest to introduce to you. His name is Ryan Bell, and he is co-owner of Cotton Blossom Winery in Marlow.
That's true.
And as you can see, he's brought some bottles of his wine today, some very special bottles. If you guys are having a little trouble with the glare, that's the gold medal reflecting the light in here. He brought some prize-winning bottles to show off and talk about. So anyway, we're going to get started, but we're going to get to know Ryan just a little bit. So are you from Marlow?
I'm not from Marlow. My wife is from Marlow. She's the other co-owner. So my wife, Megan, is from Marlow. Born and raised, grew up there her whole life. I'm originally from Oklahoma City, Moore. So we met in college, and I stole her away to the big city for a little while. And once we had kiddos, we settled back in Marlow because it seemed like the perfect place to raise kids. And we had grandma and grandpa close by and all that good stuff. So win-win. It was a win-win.
So when you were in the Oklahoma City area, were you involved with wineries or anything at that time?
I was not.
Okay.
So I am a nurse by trade.
Okay.
And I've always done hospice nursing. And so
well, then let me just stop you right there and say that is a calling. And thank you so much, because our family has experienced hospice nurse attention and care before, and it is just second to none. So thank you.
I would have never thought that's what I was going to end up doing, but when the Lord puts that call on your life and your heart, you follow.
Right. So, exactly. Wow. Well, thank you for that, because I know that families, there are no words sometimes, and you know, you guys just come in and just take care of things, and so thank you.
Appreciate that. I appreciate it. So I've done that for pretty much ever, I guess. And so I wanted a hobby to take my mind off of things in the evening, as you can imagine. And so I started making wine at our house. And I had a home office, and I would set up little tiny tanks, just little tiny 6-gallon tanks, and I would make wine. And I would want to do just one more, and I would just do one more. And that grew to about 10 or 12 little 6-gallon tanks, which is about 300 bottles worth of wine, if you do the math. And I took up my home office, and my wife came in one day and said, no more. There's no way we can drink this much wine. This has gone too far. So I said, let's open a winery. And she was bluffing. I think I called her bluff, and she said, if you can figure out the paperwork, we'll open a winery. And so we figured out the paperwork, which is a big process, applying through the federal government, the state government. There's lots of layers for alcohol manufacturers. And so we figured out the process, and we have Cotton Blossom.
Well, there you go. So what's the inspiration for the name Cotton Blossom?
I wish I had a really, really great story for you, but I'll give you the honest version. And that is, we were drinking a bottle of wine and the kids had gone to sleep for the night. And we came up with the name Cotton Blossom, and after lots of brainstorming, and that frankly is how we've named most of our wines. Most of our wines have really, like the Windmill or Whippoorwill White, they're just very, they're called fanciful names. They're just made up names. There is one wine that has a sentimental name, and that's Rock and Bell Red, and I didn't bring it with me today. And that is named after my grandpa's ranch, which was called the Rock and Bell Ranch. So there is one wine that has a sentimental name, while the rest of them are just fun.
Right. So what made you want to name that particular wine?
It was one of the very first ones I made, and it was a sweet red wine, and everybody just loved it. And so it kind of won everyone over very early on. And so I think it just stuck at that point.
Yeah.
So,
that's great. That is fun. So were you just like watching YouTube videos to figure out how to make wine in the beginning?
It's lots of research, and
Okay,
it's a lot of, if you think back to when you were in high school and you took chemistry class and you said, I'm never going to use this. I was wrong. I use it all the time now. And so it's lots of calculations and different chemistries, and you're paying a lot of attention to pH and residual sugars and things like that. And so I was self-taught pretty much exclusively. I have a very fortunate to have some great mentors that have helped me along the way and helps me make mistakes and learn from those mistakes and keep going. And so they are
business.
they are winemaking mentors. I have both. I think everybody should have great mentors
Oh, for sure.
across the board, but I have a couple for wine specifically that have made wine for decades, and they are amazing wealths of knowledge and great to help you through it.
Right. So my husband and I have watched some documentaries about wine making, but those were filmed at an actual vineyard. The people that would grow, I mean, like, in Europe.
Sure.
We went to France last summer, and we were thinking, well, maybe we want to go to a vineyard. It didn't work out for us to go do that, but so we were watching these documentaries. And so do you have a vineyard, or do you buy your fruit from?
We have vines that we grow in southeastern Oklahoma that we don't use very often. We'll make a wine out of them every once in a while. But for the most part, I'd say 99% of our grapes we bring into the state of Oklahoma. So we have basically a grape broker, which is a real job. He picks out grapes. You can tell them where you want grapes from, and they'll source them for you, and they get shipped in on great big pallets to the winery. So we get either grapes or grape juice brought into the winery, sometimes on big refrigerated trucks and things like that. And we have a really grumpy delivery driver that has to unload them because they're quite heavy. and so we bring that great product into the winery, and then we make every drop there on site.
Okay, so I'm just going off of what I know. So it appeared that making sure the grapes are picked at a precise time makes all the difference. In addition to how much heat they're exposed to, how much cold they're exposed to, things like that. So your grape broker is experienced and makes those kinds of decisions as far as the quality of the fruit.
And you get a lot of information on the bricks, on the sugar content of those grapes, on the pH of those grapes. They monitor all of that so that we can have a consistent product batch over batch. Because that's a struggle in winemaking, is to be able to replicate the same thing you made last time. So you hit a home run and you made something that was fantastic and delicious. Now you have to repeat that process. And winemaking is such an organic process. There's lots of things that can go wrong in that process. And so you are really fine tuning and being really specific with those measurements and those calculations and things like that.
Is that why sometimes people will say, I'll have a 1972 Chardonnay from blah, 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 because that year the Chardonnays were.
That's part of it. That is part of it. They know that was a great harvest year for Chardonnays, but they also know that wine rested in that bottle for 30 years. And so that wine is going to have gone through a process that we call micro-oxidization, which is where it's allowed very microscopic amounts of oxygen into the bottle through the cork over the years, which changes the flavor of that wine a little bit. And then, of course, letting it rest in the bottle, wines always kind of round out. We call it kind of rounding out, where they get a little bit smoother. And where if you drank a wine that was just bottled, oftentimes you can tell if you have a really discerning palate, but that bottle doesn't have any age on it.
Really?
So
Interesting.
a 30-year bottle of wine is probably, you know, hundreds, if not thousands of dollars for a bottle of wine.
Right, yeah.
And so, but yeah, it's all about keeping that bottle in a certain temperature and keeping that bottle at a certain humidity, because it's all about keeping that cork moist enough that it remains sealed well and helps draw some of those flavors in.
And just lets in tiny amounts of.
Very, very tiny.
Right,
Mhm.
right. So, do you have, I mean, how long have you guys been?
So we started the
Doing this.
winery 4 years. It's almost our 4th anniversary. Our 4th birthday is next month.
It's so new.
It is new. It is new. We have a great big birthday bash coming up on I think it's the 14th-ish of April.
Okay.
So we get to have our big birthday party and all that good stuff. Then, so
Okay, so do you have any wines that you're like putting back and trying to age?
we
I
just
mean, it would be hard because you
It
have to
is.
be experimenting with it at this stage.
we just sold our last bottle. We made a Pinot Noir and we let it age for about a year and a half before those bottles sold. And it was fantastic. And the trick is it's gone now and we have to do that all over again. So it's the challenge in winemaking is that I don't get to mix it up really fast, bottle it and have a quality product. It always takes a lot of time. So we're always about 6 months ahead of where we want that wine to be bottled. So we'll start thinking about Christmas wines, holiday wines in July. So we'll be doing our July 4th celebration and all of a sudden we'll be working on Christmas stuff because it'll take that long for us to be ready for that.
Wow.
So,
wow. So at this point, is the winery your only job or are you still a hospice nurse too?
I just stopped being a hospice nurse a month and a half ago.
Okay, so this thing is doing
It's doing
really well.
It is doing well.
Well, congratulations.
Thank
That's
you. I
fantastic.
appreciate it. We owned a hospice company and we sold that and I stayed on with the new owners for a little while to make sure that everything was going the right direction for them. And I finally bowed out in about a month and a half ago.
Wow.
So it's super exciting, nerve-wracking.
Oh, yeah.
All of the feelings all tied up in one.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah,
but
now.
super fun. Oh, they are. So
That's great. So, okay, so you were talking about the holiday wines.
Sure.
I know, I mean, I've kind of watched you guys over the years. So I know you kind of release different kind of seasonal wines. So how many varieties do you have available at any given time?
too many. We always say we have a wine for everybody.
Right.
But around the clock, 24/7, 365, we have 24 different varietals that are available. And then we'll introduce a few in and out throughout the year. So the one on the end, for example, with the hot pink label is our Sweetheart. And we released that as a early spring, late winter wine. And the way we do those is we will make a batch of, say, 700 bottles. And when they're gone, they're gone. We'll do that same thing for the summertime. We make a pineapple wine and some things like that. And we do the same thing. We'll make a set number and when they're gone, so if you see a seasonal one on the shelf, you have to get it while you can.
Okay.
Because it's not, well, let me think about it and I'll come back in a couple of weeks. So it probably won't be there.
Right.
But we have 24 around the year. And at any given point in time, we'll have 3 seasonals in there. So 3 or 4, we'll get kind of close to the 27 mark, 27
Okay. So
different.
in addition to the 24.
In addition.
So
to
those
24.
24 are always there.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so, yeah. And so, what is one harder to make than another? Like, is a red does one require a different process from the white, or
So,
kind of explain that?
sure. They all follow a similar process. You get your wine product, whether that's wine, grape juice or grapes that you're crushing, which is called must. So we have our wine musts, which if it's a dry wine, we'll have grape skins that float in there for a few days, a couple weeks. If it's a rosé, you'll put your red grape skins in just for a couple days to help pull some of that flavor out and give it that really pretty pink color.
Right. So the white that has red skins
Would be a rosé.
Okay.
Yeah, that's how rosés are.
Did not know that.
Yeah. And so the process is fairly similar for all of them. The duration of time that it takes to get through that process will change dramatically, depending on what kind of wine it is. If it's something light and fruity like these two on the end, usually you can do those in a couple months, from start to finish, getting through the fermentation process and the clarifying process into the bottle. Where a dry wine can take 6 months. We still have one wine that we made in 2019 that we haven't bottled yet, that is still in a tank aging. And those were Oklahoma grapes that we pulled from a vineyard actually very close to Marlow, in between Marlow and Duncan.
Right.
And so that one's just hanging out and aging, and we'll let it sit there until we think it's just right. And
So periodically taste
We
it
do.
to see how it's going.
we have a wine thief, and so we can take a little bit out and taste it. The trick with wine is you want to expose it to the least amount of oxygen as possible. And that's what keeps it from spoiling and doesn't oxidize or any of those things. And so you have to be very careful when you do that, so that you're not introducing anything that you don't necessarily want in the mix. So.
Right. And so is that a red?
That is a red. Yeah, it's a Chamberson, which was grown just off 81, actually, off Highway 81.
And is that vineyard still there?
That vineyard is still there. It's owned by a family. I think they're in Marlow. And so we haven't gotten a new batch from them yet, but harvest will be coming up before long. So
Really? When's it?
harvest will be this summer.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's still a little while.
Okay.
But in the grand scheme of things for us, that's not far.
Well,
So,
I guess so, because you guys are always looking so many months
for sure.
ahead. So, wow, okay, so I have a million questions running through my mind. This is so interesting to me. Because I'm just kind of blown away by just the whole process and how. So like when you are thinking, okay, we're gonna make a Pinot Noir, do you have a certain idea about how that is going to taste and feel in your mouth? And so if it's not what you're thinking, then what do you do with that batch?
That is a fine line, because grapes are very expensive. So you want to save as much as you can. And so we will taste that right off the bat. And usually you can tell pretty much right out of the gate from a lot of times from tasting the grape itself.
Okay.
Or just a little bit of the grape juice, how you think that's going to play out. And then, of course, if you need to kind of alter course through fermentation, there's lots of tricks and things that we can do to pull those flavor profiles back and forth. So in a dry red, like a Pinot Noir, we use oak.
Okay.
A lot of times. And so depending on how we want that flavor to go, we may choose a French oak over an American oak, or we may choose a mildly toasted oak over a heavily toasted oak, where a heavily toasted oak is going to give you almost notes of chocolate or coffee kind of notes. You may go with a lighter toast, which is going to give you a little bit more fragrant, maybe a vanilla note, and almost like a sweetness to it without having that sweet, without having sugar in there.
And you're talking about the barrel that you put it in to age?
Correct. Now
Okay.
we do everything in stainless steel, and we add oak to that stainless steel.
Oh, so you have like wood floating?
Stave, yeah, we have either staves, which are great
Okay.
big long sticks that are spiral cut,
Okay.
which are fun.
Uh-huh.
You can also do oak chips or cubes and let those float, and they'll kind of sink around. And in fermentation, the inside of that tank is kind of churning on its own
Right.
from the chemical process of the yeast.
Mhm.
And so it'll kind of stir that oak and really get it infused well. It's very expensive for us to get oak barrels inland because all of the oak manufacturers are obviously on the coast. And so the freight to get those to Oklahoma oftentimes is more than the barrel, it seems like, especially nowadays. And so it makes it very expensive to produce because you can use that barrel maybe twice at most.
Mhm.
And so we have opted for something a little bit more efficient.
Right.
So
Right. Well, I mean, there again, I think that's just very interesting that you can just do those things with different types of wood. Isn't that?
It's crazy.
It is crazy. It is. So have you ever had to dump one out?
We have had some batches that just absolutely could not be, we couldn't salvage, and
You don't
and
have
that
like
hurt.
a fake generic label that you could put over.
Maybe something different.
Yeah.
Like it's
Wine.
Wine-ish. So no, we don't. We stick pretty tried and true to our varietals and our standbys. And so we have had some that didn't turn out quite right.
Mhm.
But we have been fortunate that hasn't happened very often.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So the sweetness,
mhm.
does that come from a different fruit, or are some of the grapes just that much more sugar in them?
Some grapes do have a higher sugar content to them. So if you look at a Riesling grape is going to be very sweet on its own compared to other grapes. Now, a lot of that is determined in your fermentation process. So right off the bat, you've determined what kind of yeast you're going to use, because there's thousands of different kinds of yeast that you can choose from. So we need the grapes to be sweet. We need all of them to be sweet to make alcohol in the first place. Right. So we need the yeast to eat the sugar. It's going to produce carbon dioxide and alcohol. And we have wine. And so a lot of the wines come off fairly dry right off the bat. Once it gets through primary fermentation, which is about the first 2 weeks, everything would taste dry if you tasted it then, because there's going to be very little sugar. So our sweet stuff, we do a process called back sweetening. So we'll get it through fermentation, we'll clarify the wine, help it start getting this pretty clear color that you see here. And then we'll go in and add sugars to it at that point in time to sweeten it back up.
And so how do you flavor? Like that one's peach, you said this one was blueberry or has blueberry. Is that actual fruit? You mentioned pineapple.
Sometimes we do. Sometimes we do use actual fruit. Sometimes we use natural fruit flavors mixed in there. So it's kind of a combination in various different, which ones we think we can accomplish the right flavors with. And so fruits also have a whole nother set of variables when you're introducing them into wine, because they could have, it's kind of like rogue yeast, right? Wild yeast that has landed on that fruit. So you have to be really careful in that process, because if you were to reintroduce yeast to this wine after it's gone through clarification and things like that, it would re-ferment, right? And eat up all the rest of the sugar in the bottle. And essentially it would become champagne. That's how champagne is made. That's the old-fashioned way.
There you go.
So that is the old-fashioned way. You would reintroduce some yeast, and it would put a cork in it real quick, and in about 2 or 3 weeks, it would carbonate itself.
Really?
Because it gets trapped in that bottle, and it force carbonates itself, and then you have a sparkling wine that you didn't mean to make. So.
So was the first bottle of champagne an
The
accident?
first, I can tell you one of mine was. So, we make a plum wine that we have made pretty much from the get-go. It's
Right.
very popular. And I got distracted when I was making it, and I corked those bottles, put them on the shelf, and 2 weeks later, we had corks popping out of bottles and all sorts of fun stuff. So some lessons you learn the hard way. Some
So I'm
lessons.
guessing champagne has a different corking process.
It
If
does.
you intend to make
It does. If you make it in this type of bottle on accident, you can shatter the bottle while you're holding it. So champagne glass is much thicker. The shape of it helps with that pressure. And then you would use a mushroom cork, right? Which is what we've all seen with the wire cage over the top, all
So
that fun stuff.
that's why that looks like that.
Mhm.
I don't know what I thought. I guess I just thought, well, that's fun, you know, you pop that, the spray comes up. So, okay, well, that's very interesting.
So-
too. Very nice. So you accidentally.
We made it on accident one time. So,
That's funny. So, of the 24 that you
Mhm.
carry all the time, what are like the top requested or
Sure. I would
purchased?
say there's some of these that are right in front of us.
Okay,
But our Whippoorwill White, which is the one in the middle, with the white cap, is a peach apricot Chardonnay, which is very popular. And so we have I would say, you know, between that, the red cap right here, second from the end, that's our sangria wine. That's a super popular choice. And then we make one called Farmhouse Red, and that is it's a Cabernet Sauvignon that we
Right.
sweeten with blackberries. And so it has been popular for, I mean, I would say that's probably the single-handedly the highest selling wine we make is
So
probably Farmhouse Red.
do they tend to be sweet?
That menu is split down the middle
Is it?
perfectly. So
Is
12 and 12 is fairly typical. Now, our specials that we bring on, I'd say 8 times out of 10, they are sweet.
Mhm.
The specials are. But we keep a pretty well-balanced menu. I am a dry wine drinker. I have been for years. I'm a Pinot Noir guy. I'll make my batch for me over here, and I'll make the batch for the store over here. But I drink a dry red year round, whether it's summer or winter. I pretty much stick to that, but we are split pretty 50-50 down the road between sweet and dries.
Right.
So
starting off, I mean, you have to get your name out there somehow. You guys, like you said, you're coming up on 4 years. So year one, what was that like?
a hope and a prayer.
Yeah.
Is what it was like. We had a little tiny building on Highway 81 in the middle of Marlow, right across from the bank. And it was a 775 square foot space, so very small. And we had no idea how Stevens County would respond to a winery. There hadn't been any others, so that could be a really great thing or a really bad thing, one or the other. And so we took off that first year. I remember the very first time we opened, we had a grand opening on a Saturday, and we opened at 12. We were open from 12 to 6 hours. And the line to the winery went out the door, down the street, and wrapped around the corner. And it took us all day long to get through every person. And I remember just being exhausted by the time it was over. We shut the door, locked it. I turned around and looked at the store, and there were probably 6 bottles left on the shelves. And we had sold every single thing, basically everything that we had. And so that was our sign.
Huge encouragement.
Huge
Yeah.
right off the bat. So
Oh, yeah.
you just feel amped up and you said, let's start making wine. And so you just make as much as you possibly can until, midnight. And then you do it again the next day.
Wow.
So, you're just trying to make as much as you
So
can.
were those mainly Marlowe people?
I think so. Yeah. At the time it was very local.
But since then, I mean, what's the key? What do you think the key is to getting your name out there to where 4 years later you have award-winning wines? And I mean, that seems like a very small window of time. And those 4 years were COVID.
They were COVID years, right?
So
in the middle, we weren't even open. We had decided to buy a new building, and we moved over one block onto 2nd Street. And probably the month of us finishing renovations on that building, COVID hit. And so nobody even came in the store. And of course, lots of mandates were passed down and we were closed, right?
so you guys were not considered an essential.
We were not considered essential. And so we could do, the state made an emergency decision that we could do deliveries and we could do curbside pickups. And so for the first, I'd say, 6 months, 7 months, that's all we did is curbside pickups. And then late that summer, the first person stepped into the winery for the first time, the new location.
Right.
And so it was a wild ride to get through those COVID years, of course. And fortunately for us, alcohol production did well during COVID.
Right.
And has continued to, and we're super grateful for it.
Right. So, how long then? So you guys have been open for almost a year then when that happened, because that was March of 2020.
Right.
So, then when were you able, had you gone to some, I don't know what competitions or whatever they call them?
We had not
prior
done
to
any
that?
competitions before that, because they all started getting shut down. Because this competition that these medals are from is hosted at the fairgrounds. And so they display all the awards at the state fair. But you have to enter those wines in June for them to be displayed in September. So a lot of those were canceled and postponed. So we have done the contests at the fair the last 2 years.
Okay.
This year we won seven awards and 7 medals. And the year before we had won 5. So we were super excited and it kind of took off. So
yeah, so that's, I mean, I'm thinking, okay, the fair, how many thousands and thousands of people come by.
Lots of people.
And see your label and all of that. So do you go, like, Duncan has like wine on the Chisholm Trail, and do you go to little events like that?
We did originally, and I think that's part of the reason we started getting recognized is because we went to every festival and market we could go to. We'd go to farmers markets, we would go to the wine festival in Hennessy and Chickasha, and one year I think we did about 12, which is a lot to pack up 20 cases or 30 cases of wine and take them with you on a 2-hour adventure somewhere. And so we did those very heavily for the first year after things kind of started, right before things kind of went sideways with COVID. And so we did a lot of contests or a lot of festivals then. We don't do as much now just because the winery is such a busy place during our normal hours. So it's hard to divide the team to go, to all these different places.
Right. And earlier before we went live, you were saying that from the first 60 days last year to the first 60 days of this year,
correct.
Is it sales or demand or request, or what is it that is?
Sales are up for bottles of wine that have left our building have gone up by about 142% just from the first 60 days of this year versus the first 60 days of last year.
That is phenomenal.
So it is, we are blessed and we are thrilled, but
overwhelming
for sure.
Okay, so were you 6 months ago? Were you anticipating an increase?
We were not. We had stayed at a very smooth, 40% growth, which is still
Great.
great.
Yeah.
But we had stayed very consistent. So we had produced for, continuing that 40% line.
Yeah.
And the first quarter of this year has surprised us, and jumped an additional 100% up from where we had anticipated it being. So it's super exciting.
It
Super
is.
exciting.
So how are you staying up with demand then right now?
We are up to 11 employees now, which for us is huge. I remember the first time we hired one employee and I thought, oh my goodness, we have an employee. And so now we have 11, and we have a sales team, an event team, a production team is the big key to that, helping me get it from start to finish.
Right.
So because it takes a lot of effort, a lot of work, a lot of manual labor.
Yeah.
Wine is very heavy. So
Yes. Heavy to carry.
heavy to carry. So we hired extra hands, a few extra set of hands to make that go a little bit smoother. So we're adapting.
And so you said also that you just broke ground.
We did. We just broke ground on the new winery, which will still be in Marlow. If you drive through town and you know where the supermarket is, Marlow Foods, we are going to be directly across the street from them. There's an empty lot.
That used to be where the old cars and stuff
Yeah,
were?
everybody that's from Marlow remembers it as there used to be an old gas station there.
Oh,
And that's been gone for
Well, there you go.
years. And so the north end of that property will be putting our new winery there, over 5,000 square feet, with dedicated production space. If you've been to the winery that we have now, you are in the middle of all of it when you walk in. There's a shelf, there's all of our products, but there's also tanks right next to you. So you're literally standing in the space where that wine is going to be made. And those workers come in Sunday through Wednesday so we can clean up, put everything back together for customers to be there Thursday through Saturday. So it's going to be fantastic when we have our own production space that can run any hour we want it to, and not be as noisy and messy and things like that, because winemaking is a sticky process.
So do you have anyone besides yourself that is like the taster and the one who says, no, this needs more?
We have just a couple that have that stamp of approval
Right.
to move a wine along. So it's something that we keep kind of close.
Yeah.
Because I never want to put a wine out that we haven't tried and that we don't know meets our expectations and our standards for sure.
So can you because I've never been able to master the swishing on the front of my mouth, and then every time I think it makes me laugh. And so I end up kind of, getting choked a little bit or something, but
It is an art.
It is. Yes, it is. So do you have to did you have to be trained a little bit on how to do that? So what are you expecting whenever you're going through that process?
It depends on the wine. A sweet wine will hit you just right on the front of the palate. And you should feel some of the alcohol on the back end of the palate. And so for a dry red, you'll sense different flavors. It's called a mouth feel.
Right.
And you'll have a different mouth feel depending on where that wine hits on your tongue. So you're getting new taste buds all the time, right? Every month you're getting new taste buds. And so your taste can change and shift through adulthood. And so it's kind of something that you adapt with, and you really learn what that wine's supposed to taste like and what you're expecting it to taste like. And you can say, wait a second, something's off here a little bit. And we can, make alterations as needed.
Right.
But it has taken a while to get to that point where I can really tell when I smell it right off the bat if it's going to be right or wrong. We had a sweet wine that we made just this week that's too sweet, and I lifted the lid up and I said it's too sweet, because I could smell it right off the bat. So there's learn all the little ins and outs and all the little nuances of what those wines should be like.
So when, I got COVID one
Mhm.
time during
Okay.
all of that. And lost my sense of smell and taste for a while.
For a while.
Yeah, have you had that?
We did have COVID about a year and a half ago.
Uh-huh.
And I was fortunate that I still could taste everything.
Yeah.
So it was a close call there.
Thinking I would have been,
Mhm.
if it was just me, I would have lost my business because I didn't smell for a long time. My
Right.
taste kind of started coming back after a while, but
Mhm.
that would be huge in your.
We were fortunate to have a very mild case. I don't want to jinx myself, but we had a very mild case, and 3 days later,
Yeah.
it was all.
Yeah, this was like pretty early on,
Was
like
it?
at the end of 2020. So yeah, that is you don't ever think about
Right.
not having those senses. And
Right.
so when they're gone, and especially when your
I know.
business relies on that.
100%.
Yeah. So, okay, so now you've kind of had a lot of success in this one particular competition.
Mhm.
Are you thinking of branching out and trying outside Oklahoma
We'll branch out
competitions?
a little bit.
Uh-huh.
This is one of the biggest ones for Oklahoma, so we'll keep doing this one. But we will venture out into some other contests. We've gotten some invitations to a few lately that we're considering.
Right.
So
Very
we
nice.
will contemplate throwing our hat in the ring for those. A couple in Texas and a couple in New York and one out in California. So there's some possibilities that
seems fun.
we could kind of venture out a little bit, but we'll see.
Well, I mean, I don't know, for me, it'd be kind of like, okay, what would be out there?
Right.
What do I?
How do I stack up?
Yeah,
Right.
what could I go and taste other people and kind of compare and things like,
Super fun.
yeah. Plus you just never know what kind of connections you
Oh,
make
yeah.
and things like that. And,
Absolutely. We just got back from Napa 2 weeks ago, so
oh,
we
really?
made lots of new friends. So
So was that just an exploration kind of thing?
it was just me and my wife, and we ran out there for a long weekend, I guess, and we met all sorts of fun new people, tried all new varietals that we had not tried before. It was a great call it research and development trip.
There you go. That's a business expense right
business.
there.
Michelle, write down for the CPA.
Okay, so these won gold medals, but this one has like 2 ribbons on it, and that one has.
does.
So tell us what those
So
are
we'll
for.
start here on the end. This is pretty as a peach. It started off as just a seasonal one for us,
Uh-huh.
and people just loved it. So we decided to bring it back as a permanent feature on the menu. And so we sent this one in, and it won gold for its category. And then if you look here, you can see the label.
Okay,
This
yeah.
ribbon, it also won first place for label design. So, which was super fun because it's got a really fun typeset and
Right.
design. We do all of our own design for our labels. We don't outsource any graphic designs or anything like that.
Mhm.
My wife and I both have degrees in in graphic design, and so we just keep it in house. So it's just the way we want it, I guess. And then this one is Whippoorwill White. It's a peach apricot Chardonnay. It won gold for its category, but it also has ribbons, which are super fun. We won best in show for whites. So for every white wine that was entered, we won. This was the top white wine for all categories.
Mhm.
And then we had Grand Champion Oklahoma, which is the #1 award, all wine categories, all colors, rosés, whites, sparkling. They throw everything together and they pick their favorite out of everybody. And so we got to bring that home. So we were super excited. And I set myself up to not get my feelings hurt, of course. And so one of our friends said, "Oh, the results are online," because they send them to the participants a day early before they post them. And I before I opened the email, I I talked to my, I said, oh, it's not that big of a deal. We probably didn't win anything. And then when I saw our name on Grand Champion, it was fantastic. It was a great feeling. It was a great feeling. So
That is so phenomenal.
yeah, it's super fun.
I mean, just 4 years in,
4 years in.
I mean, and really that was like 3.5 years because you submitted that last
In
June.
June, right?
So, wow, really just about 3, because that's not too far from April. That is really great. I am just so excited that you're having so much success.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it. It is a blast. It is an absolute blast. So, and that's what we want people to feel when they come into the winery.
Yeah.
We have a no wine intimidation policy, right? We don't want anybody to ever feel intimidated whenever they come in, because sometimes wine drinkers can get snooty.
Right.
And we've all been there. And so we don't want to give off that vibe at all. So when people come to the winery, we're super laid back. We don't ever want anybody to feel intimidated, or we'll sit and talk to you about wine all day long and tell you anything you want to know. So.
Well, tell us about some of the events you guys have coming up.
Sure.
You've got a piece of paper that's
I have a list because I have people much more organized than I am. So we have sip and shops. Those happen once a month. It's happening today right now until 7 o'clock, so you could still make it. We bring in some fun vendors, some local folks who have different businesses, and they set up in our upstairs area. So you can come in, grab a glass of wine, shop around, do some local shopping, which is what we always support. So that's always one Thursday a month. We have Taste of Summer weekend, which is March 30th through April 1st.
Okay.
Now this is a big one for us. We call it the Taste of Summer. We make one wine a year, and we make it one time a year. And we have never been able to keep it on the shelf for more than a weekend. And that is a watermelon Moscato. And so we take our classic Moscato and we sweeten it with some watermelon. We originally started doing it around the Watermelon Festival in Rush. And so we have made that every single year. And every single year we make it 3 days, and we have none left. And so this year we are convinced we're going to make enough that we can make it at least 3 weekends. So, I don't know if we'll make it, but that's our goal. And that's when we're going to kick off Watermelon Moscato for the year. Is the Taste of Summer weekend, which is the 1st of April.
Right.
So
30th, 31st, and then April 1st.
Yeah. So not far off.
No, it's not. That's just a few weeks.
It's crazy. You think how fast the year's already going by. It's April's almost starting here.
So do you limit how many bottles people can buy?
We do not. We probably should, but we have not. We never want to be the disappointment. Let's see what else is on here. We have paint night coming up April 1st, which is that weekend. We have lots of fun craft nights, paint nights, all that good stuff.
I saw that you guys had a fun sweetheart dinner, kind of Valentine's
date night.
Date night. I thought that looked like a really fun.
We're trying to give people lots of options where they can stay here. You don't have to drive to the city, right? To have a fantastic time. Yeah. You've got amazing talent here in Stevens County. You've got amazing businesses here in Stevens County. And if you're not a wine drinker, you won't hurt my feelings. Pick another local company to support. And so we are all about that. And so we try to offer lots of fun things, usually about 3 weekends a month. We typically have something going on at the winery. It's what it kind of feels like we kind of hit that rhythm. So we had date night not that long ago where you could come in and you get wine and charcuterie and all sorts of fun stuff. We have bingo this weekend. So if you're a bingo player,
bingo's always fun.
I call bingo. And so it's like my favorite thing to do. The girls do all of the events. I don't touch anything because you don't want me to try to show you how to paint. I promise you. But bingo I can handle. Bingo I can handle. And so this Saturday is supposed to be beautiful. 78 degrees. We've got the patio open. It'll be a blast. So we'll play bingo. It's free. We don't charge anybody to play bingo. We just come and play and give away fun little prizes, stuff like that. So Come on to Marlow and bingo night. Yeah, it's like at 6 o'clock this Saturday. So, yeah. So I'm trying to think of what else. So we've got the birthday weekend and middle of April. So lots of stuff to do. Lots of stuff to do.
It's like you guys have it going on over
We
there.
do, and we are aching to get into the new building so we can have a stage, and we'll have vines there. We'll have like little mini vineyard in the back and all sorts of fun stuff. So we're super excited.
That's so great. Wow. So when you decided you called your wife's bluff, did you envision what is happening now?
100% no. I can tell you 100% no. I really thought it was just gonna be a fun little project, right? We were gonna have a tiny little 800 square foot winery, and it would do enough to keep itself going, and it would just, be a great little addition to town, but nothing major.
Yeah.
And then it just took off, and we are super thankful that it did.
Yeah.
And so we moved into self-distribution so that we could distribute to stores and restaurants on our own. So we didn't have to mess with a wholesaler and things like that. So now we're in lots of different restaurants and liquor stores. And so we're just keep expanding and growing that territory. Now we have stores in Lawton and Bray and all the way down to Temple and all the way up to Chickasha. So we kind of just keep expanding. Our sights are set on Oklahoma City next. So you will soon have great wine in Oklahoma City. So
you don't know what you're missing.
You don't. So we are looking for stores up there, and we've got our sales team about to head that direction. So we're super, it's great. And come put us on the map.
Right.
So.
I think it's wonderful. And I just love the way it just kind of happened.
It did.
It just kind of
it's very
happened.
organic, which is fantastic.
Okay, so I have one question. When you get the grapes, do you have a vat that people walk around on them and?
Everybody asks if they can I Love Lucy it. One day we will do a grape stomp. We won't use those grapes because that grosses me out, but we will do a grape stomp for fun.
You can be more organic than that.
Oh, that is certainly organic. That is certainly organic. But I think when we get the new place, we'll have lots of backyard space so we can set up a grape stomp,
I think that sounds
which will be
super fun.
Super fun. So you can live all your I Love Lucy dreams out in the grape stomp. So
that's awesome. Well, listen, Ryan, congratulations. I wish you the very best. I cannot wait to see what you guys do in another year or two, and just
it's a wild ride.
Yeah, it is a wild ride.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much for being on Trail Talk today. Well, when we say goodbye, we always say happy trails.
Okay.
All right, you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, happy trails.
Happy trails.